There he goes. Hang on. Let me tag you. Here we go. All right. Edit. Hmm. Well, let me do it. I'll do it afterwards.
Maybe it
Weird.
doesn't think I exist.
You're a ghost.
Could be.
You're a ghost. All right. So this is what? Our fourth? Is this the fourth? Yeah. The
The
fourth.
third, I think is the third.
Oh, it's the third. Is it the third?
Hmm.
I thought it was the fourth. Oh, I guess because we did the show first. Okay.
That's right.
So here we go again, digging into the depths of the ghost connotation, definition, experience, double, triple, and multi-dimensional entendres. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for joining us on our weekly program. And I will hand it over to you.
Thank you very much, Todd.
Hmm.
This week's show is especially interesting. We're not into October yet and Halloween, but I suggested to our viewers and listeners that it would be interesting to explore some of your favorite movies and books that have ghosts in them. Some people look at the horror genre as one area of interest. And really, the question is, how do we perceive ghosts and spirits in these examples of popular culture? And I got some very interesting replies. People suggested movies that are preferences, and even certain movies they've watched more than once. Do you watch movies more than once, Todd?
Yeah, the second time I watch a movie is always the best time.
Hmm. Some people say that about leftovers. They
I say
taste
that
better
too
the
about
second
leftovers.
time. That's right. Well, I'd love to share with you some of the suggestions or favorite movies people have shared with me.
Hmm.
One of the ones that came up a number of times is E.T., the
Hmm.
extraterrestrial. And
Hmm.
for some people, they don't see it as a horror movie. They see it as a heartwarming story. It's a classic, of course, for those of us who've seen it, but it also brings up a number of fears. Now, E.T. isn't a ghost specifically, at least not for everyone, but there are people in the book that refuse to see E.T. They don't want to see it. And there is this fear of being alienated, a theme that recurs in that movie. And also the idea of yearning to connect with something in the cosmos, something that we might reflect on as, the divine. Have you seen that movie?
Oh yeah, I've seen it. Yeah,
Hmm.
absolutely. I haven't seen. I saw it once, I think,
Hmm.
maybe twice, but it was whenever it came out. What was it in the 80s?
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those movies that sometimes people will go back to, but it's also a movie that people will watch with their kids.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's kind of all over the place because you have the little van going down the street with the equipment, like with the little satellite on the top of it, listening
Mm,
to everyone in the house. And so that's almost like the ghost of the true technology that's available, kind of a small example of what's probably happening in every house for many years. So
mm,
there's a lot of elements to that. I hadn't thought about that. I would have never thought of E.T. as a ghost movie, but I can
mm,
see where people can do that. Yeah.
mm. Well, for some people, the idea of ghost is associated with a horror movie. Now, E.T. isn't necessarily classified as a horror movie, but if you look at what you fear and what kinds of fears are evoked in you, then it can be considered sort of more of a ghost story. But another one that has come up a number of times is the movie Poltergeist. Have you
Mm.
heard of that one?
Oh yeah, I've seen it. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah, well, it's funny how people have come up with different impressions of this movie. Most people who contacted me about it talk about it giving them goosebumps and really touching something quite deep inside them because it addresses the other side. It addresses darkness. It addresses the idea of something that people don't want to look at. And yet, when children are involved, there is a very different twist
Mm.
that is evoked. What do you remember about that movie?
Um, well, of course, they're here. You know, when she says they're here. I also remember the diminutive lady. This house is clear. But I also remember the things that revolved around it, like that little girl um, transitioning and the teenage girl transitioning, and I believe the little boy did too eventually, and two or three other characters did. So, yeah, there's elements. Again, just like the ET example, there's all kinds of different elements there. Like the guy in front of the mirror when he starts pulling his face apart, and the face itself is like melting, and it just
Mm,
becomes these two eyeballs. I mean, so there's so many things there that bring you into that ghost atmosphere. Ghost as in unknown. I don't want to look at it. Is it possible? That type of thing.
mm. Yeah, and there's also the temperature gradient or the temperature variation.
Mm,
Um, the idea that if there's something cold, that something outside of us wants to get in. And most people are overheated,
mm,
in this day and age, and we deal with rashes and things that are uncomfortable because of heat. But you can also look at the cold as being symbolic. It's a metaphor of those things we resist, those things we don't necessarily want to look at. And yet there's something at the same time that's pulling us toward them.
mm.
Very literally in the movie, when the protagonist, the child, sort of disappears into the light or the darkness, depending on how you look at it, and they're actually reaching in to the darkness to pull her
Mm,
out.
mm,
So,
mm.
so this happens a lot, doesn't it? We are sort of drawn to face those things which evoke discomfort.
Yeah, because we tell ourselves that this cold that we're feeling, in other words, this lack of resonance, is our natural nature, but it's not because because something's pushing us towards it. And that's very, to me, very indicative of what's happening right now for all of us because the universal mirror is in our face. And that is the greatest ghost there is. That part are those parts of us that we have been cold to or don't look at.
Well, when you think about the heat and the cold, also this is duality again, isn't it? It's two sides of the same coin. And so often we're taught we're one and not the other. We're not both. But if you embody the entire environment, then you're both inner and outer. You're warm, you're cold. One isn't external to you, it isn't separate from you. So these kinds of questions are inviting us to sort of reflect on how we see the very world we live in.
Yeah. If I think fire and ice are a great, probably, I don't know what would be a better metaphor with the level of perception that we've come into for dark and light or positive and negative. Because who wants to be in the extreme cold and who wants to be in extreme heat? So at some level, it doesn't matter what choice you make because they're really going to bring one and the same thing. But yeah, I
Mm,
think that the heat, the temperature thing is a real thing for what I just said, you
mm.
know.
Well, I like the analogy between where I come from in Canada, sort of the northern hemisphere, versus where I'm currently living in Australia. Because in the northern hemisphere where I grew up, we have extreme cold. For anyone who isn't familiar with that climate, we can get down to -40, which is quite cold in the winter. And the tendency is to have a heat source inside, to have a warmer inside than outside in the winter. And in Australia, you tend to have the other extreme. You tend to have very hot weather, can get up to 40 in some places 50 degrees in this country, which is a bit over the top for many people. But what's interesting is so often when people have really hot temperatures, what they do is they'll put on air conditioning, want to be in a cold space. And there's an extreme difference between the inside and the outside. And in the
Mm,
same way, in the Northern Hemisphere, when it's cold outside, people want to have a much warmer inside, again, to have a big difference. So you wonder why people get colds, get the sniffles, because if your body is used to 25 inside and it's -40 outside, your body has to adjust to the different temperatures when you're changing environments. And if there's a huge difference in the inside temperature and the outside temperature, then depending on how your body functions, you have to recalibrate. And it's just an interesting point of reflection related to the ghost stories, because why is it that we associate extreme hot with hell or
mm,
evil or danger, and extreme cold with something that makes us uncomfortable in a movie like Poltergeist? We're
mm.
not necessarily making the connection with our everyday lives. There are connections that can be made, aren't there?
Yeah, and then there's also the personal self-reflection that you have. Like if why am I trying to cool myself down? So if I'm trying to cool myself down, I'm not acclimating myself with the natural uh, offering, you could say, by nature, the universe outside. My
Mm.
body, yeah, I'm here. I'm not going to die, but I want to regulate things. We talk about the flow, we talk about manifestation, and maybe we're supposed to acclimate with all things and the manifestation. The value of the ghost that we don't see or move away from. uh, we can allow it to show itself, and therefore the natural unfoldment is less impeded. You
Mm.
know, interesting.
And you can make an analogy with animals too. Animals don't wear shoes except for horses. Their shoes put on for racing and that sort of thing. But animals will grow fur in environments when they need to adapt,
Mm,
and they'll shed that fur when they're in a different environment because they're adapting. Whereas humans tend to disconnect themselves from the earth. They wear thick-soled shoes or they'll wear very heavy clothing, and it will cloak them or camouflage them or disconnect them somehow from the external temperature, from the environment. So as we become more immersed in nature, we find that our clothes, how we interact, how we touch the environment changes. So when we walk barefoot on the ground and we deepen the grounding and we feel the resonance of the earth, we're in a very different place than if we are covering ourselves or putting barriers between ourselves and the environment. We're not ghosting the environment, we're actually immersing in all of it.
true. True. And not to get into conspiracy or disclosure or anything like that, but if you just look at what you're saying and just take some basics like sunscreen. Sunscreen is counter to what it's advertised to be, or sunglasses. The importance
Mhm.
of receiving sunlight through the lenses of your eyes and how that affects the potency of the sun's rays. So we have clothes, we have rubber soles, we have sunglasses, we have sunscreen, we have belief systems built on this is going to cause you cancer, and we have a system set up to where it's backwards of what it really should be. You have, for instance, the stereotypical work day. where you're indoors out of the sun, and by the time you go to get your nutrition from the sun, it's already dark, you know. So these are ghosts, and you know, I can look at it and see the programming that created more ghosts. But ultimately, you know, like I love that ET thing, especially because we are the ghost. We're the only ghost there is.
We just see ourselves in different forms, don't we, Todd?
Yeah, yeah. We wear a mask and we see ourselves in different forms, and it's the masks that we don't put on that are the ghost, and they're actually the real.
Exactly. Well, I have some other movies that were given to me on lists this week.
Mm,
One that surprised me a little bit was one called The Time Traveler's Wife.
mm,
It's not the traditional horror genre of story, but what this individual said to me was that for them, it was scary or a kind of ghost story because they had the fear of abandonment. And the story is about the appearance and disappearance of this man, this time traveler, and how the wife doesn't know when he's coming or going. And so this person had a fear of rejection as well. So watching the movie was a process of um, working through those things at the same time as a form of entertainment. So you could also say it was a journey of acceptance. And the person said that they had a fear of acceptance and the fear of being loved for who they were as well.
mm.
So that is a bit of an unusual one in comparison to something like Poltergeist or some of the other ones I'm going to bring up. But I feel that it is relevant because we are all afraid of different things.
Mm.
And this is something that is very relevant to the person who brought it to my attention. Can you relate to that movie? Have you seen it?
Yeah, yeah, I've seen that movie. It's a great movie, and you make a great point, or the both of you do, because again, we're talking about ghosts, and ghosts are things that you don't see. You know, you might be
Or don't
unconscious
want to
of.
see?
Yeah, you're unconscious of it, or you're conscious of it, but you don't, and you continue to divorce yourself from it. But that movie's a great movie. I'd recommend that to anybody because there's a reason it's called The Time Traveler's Wife and not The Time Traveler. Now he's obviously you know, a key aspect in the movie, but the value of the movie and of the experience is her.
That's right. And depending on your perspective, you know, you can live vicariously through either or both
Mm,
and see that each of them have different fears. He has a fear of not being able to return, and she has a fear that he won't. So
hmm
it sort of goes back and forth.
mm.
Another one that was brought up and brought to my attention, maybe one more people relate to, The Exorcist. And more recently, there's the movie The Pope's Exorcist as well, which is a different approach to the same concept. Have you heard of either of those?
I haven't seen the second one. Obviously, I've seen The Exorcist. Yeah,
Mhm,
absolutely. I saw it at like
mhm.
9 years old. It freaked me out. I
And
think
so is
that
your head spinning around?
well, the music from it, Tubular Bells, because you know,
Yeah.
like a lot of young kids, you know, you listen to the radio when you go to bed, and I'd be listening to the radio, and that damn thing would come on. I had to turn it off. No, it was an extremely activating experience for anyone of any age because of the realm of possibility. Is this true? Can this happen? And you know, speaking from my own experience, spending a couple of days, a weekend, and one short afternoon with somebody who shapeshifted in front of my eyes
Mm,
into that into I don't know if I would call it a demon, but it certainly wasn't what they looked like before the transformation, and also the voice, right?
mm.
You know, so I feel there's a value to being exposed. You know, we're here to collect information, and at some point the light bulb's going to go off, like through your book and through people's awakenings, true awakenings, that the object of the game is to experience as much as you can. I mean, obviously, you don't want to get, drunk and disorderly, but the things that we're um, ignoring or denying or looking away from are the very things where our growth comes from. So, I mean,
Mm,
that movie is a wild movie. It's a wild movie, but it's worth a watch.
mm. Well, isn't it interesting how people see images and they start creating a story around them? And we all have experiences that we draw from, and it's those experiences that we imbue with meaning when it comes to looking at our symbols. And in that movie, you have religious symbols, you have
Hmm.
dark symbols. How you see them, what you see, depends on you. Very much like cloud watching. You and I, Todd, can look at a cloud in the sky. You can see one thing, I can see another. Neither of them are right or wrong. It's just what we're seeing. And it's based on our associations and what we're ready to see, our language. And in that particular movie, the first one, The Exorcist, but it also applies to more recent one. Um, we talk about possession, and the word possession is a very interesting one. Possession by what? By whom? People get crazy, and you can look at it in terms of the psyche on one level, because our psyche can get torn apart when we attempt to take on board conflicting programming. If you have one person or one organization or one structure that tells you to behave in one way and another one that gives you a different message, it can cause havoc inside your psyche because whatever name you give it, you're looking for that thing that you consider to be acceptable. And when you have conflicts within yourself, symbolically, it drives you crazy. I don't know if it would spin your head around, quite literally, it depends on the person, but it is one way of looking at the film. Of course, if you're religious, you're going to have a different take on it. If you're a scientist, you're going to have a different take on it. But sometimes we're also interdisciplinary, and it's helpful to look at things from many different points of view because you get different things out of it at different stages of your life, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, and that's the whole point I was making earlier because
Mm,
everything is energy. And one thing that I've learned, I'm going to say, since I came into this arena in 2012, 13, 14, started meeting people around the world and starting to get a greater palette to paint with, right? I started to meet people that early on that talked about the dark, you know, and these would be people that I wouldn't associate with normally. And again, it's just energy. But to your point, everybody sees it differently. So when you start to open up to what another person's saying or experiencing or explaining about their experience, you do see another side of yourself. You go into a greater depth of that psyche that you're talking about, and so eh, they both have that coldness, that frozen tundra up in northern Canada, and the holy hot hell in the middle of the outback in Australia have the same. They have equal things to offer. So that you would never think that I wouldn't, that The Exorcist would even be a ghost movie. It was just like this crazy ass. But even as a young kid, even watching it later, I think there's something healthy about fear, in the same sense that there's something healthy about the ego and what it can offer. It doesn't have to be the dominant force, but can give you a red flag or a heads up that, hey, there's something here for you to look at. There's a reason that you're feeling your ego, or there's a reason that you're seeing your ego. But yeah, I think fear is that type of symbol or gateway.
mm, so true. And whatever associations you have, however you envision it as a symbol, it's still you. This is the thing. We're taught to see things as separate from ourselves. And it doesn't matter what we see, but the stories are what allow us to permit things to get in. We have to feel what's going through us.
Mm,
And if we resist whatever that is, whatever symbol that we create in front of us, then that's inviting to sit with it. That's inviting us to reflect, well, what is this really telling me?
mm, mm. Yeah, or like in my my little evolution in my teenage puberty years when I couldn't listen to that song, it would come on at night and I'm jamming. I knew at some point, it was seventh or eighth grade, because it was a very popular tune. It would come on FM radio at night. But I knew that I had to be able to sit through the whole thing. I knew I didn't understand it, but I knew there was something that I couldn't resist. I have to get over this. Yeah, good
Hmm.
teacher. Good teacher.
I imagine you would have seen it differently at age 9 than you would now, too.
Well, I see it now almost like a parody, I guess, because I've seen it so many times. But speaking of the
Hmm.
parodies, there's been many parodies made about it. I think there was
Yes.
a movie made about it. I know Richard Pryor did it on Saturday Night Live. He did it in his stand-up. Um, so that's another thing. We don't often think of the humor or the potential of laughter and the wisdom that it brings in a ghost experience. But like everything else, like our traumas that we've overcome that were ghost until we did, we can now speak about them without a charge. And in many cases, we can laugh about it, you know, which is
Mm.
good, which is good. It's a signal of neutralization, I think.
Mm. Well, one of the effects of some of these movies is sleep paralysis.
Mm,
And it brings up an interesting point that can apply to a number of the movies that have been suggested that I explore here. Um, the idea, what's going on physiologically within us, when the heart races, if we imagine a witch or some crazy character, demon floating up on top of us, whatever it happens to be, it represents something that wants to come in. It's something that we resist. So if you sort of reflect on it from that point of view, the assumption is that that thing is evil, that thing is bad, that thing is wrong. There that's what keeps it away from us. That's what perpetuates the illusion of separation. Yet it simply represents what we resist. And when
mm.
you can bring it back to that, it doesn't matter what form it takes. It could be a mutating bacteria, it could be a demon, a poltergeist. Use these images, these symbols in culture, in books, in movies, in order to draw our attention to things, to make them more palatable on some level. And when we watch movies, when we read books, and we encounter these things, they're valuable because of guiding us through a feeling-based journey. It's one of the ways that it's valuable. And as soon as we begin to allow ourselves to feel things that we tend to resist, then that takes us to a whole new level.
Mm. Yeah, exactly. Because you got to feel it. I
Mm,
mean, there's a reason that, in 3, 4, 5, 6 years old, all my dreams and all my experiences that I didn't understand were multidimensional, were reptiles and gargoyles and scary lava monsters and, and just different things like that. And those were some of the most imprinted moments of my life. Looking out my bedroom window at night, hearing this giant bull hopping over fences to come to my house, but it was relentless, and eventually we do. You can't fight Mother Nature, so to speak, or Mother Universe. If something persists, it's going to persist until it's seen, and you make a great point because it is us. It really is us. There's a great book written by a lady named Anne Kagan. and it's called The Afterlife of Billy Fingers. And I read it when I first woke up in 2012, 2011. And she's a psychologist, and her brother dies. And she didn't believe in any of the woo woo. She was a scientific mind. And he starts talking to her. And there's a bunch of
Mm,
memes she made that they're still, you still see them out there from time to time. But one of the things that he said to her was, if everyone from the human perspective, perception, could understand the energies around them and how, in a sense, little decision they actually make, because those aspects around them are making them for them, and it's kind of the personal monad of 6 points of darkness and 6 points of light. Basically, you've got these parts of you that are trying to come in, and some people might call it a spiritual war or whatever. But the point is, these are the things, we can talk about embodying Saint Germain and Yeshua and Magdalene and Kuan Yin and all these other things. But the things closest to us, those are the most powerful points of embodiment. And these are the ghosts.
mm. I reflect on some movies that really influenced me early on as well. I remember in year seven, I had a teacher who was very open-minded, and we had a wake-a-thon at my junior high school, and she organized the movie schedule, and she incorporated some Stephen King movies in there. And I had not, at that stage, read any of his books. I wasn't quite familiar with his storylines, but I watched a movie called Cujo, which was
Mm.
about a Saint Bernard dog that went rabid. And it was quite nasty. And until having attempted to sit through that movie, I don't know to this day if I watched the whole thing. I think I covered my eyes. I had had a stuffed Saint Bernard sitting on my bed as a child. And that Saint Bernard dog went into the basement after that movie. I just was not willing to sleep with it anymore.
There's a,
So,
yeah. And I think part of coming to terms with things like this is admitting, like, I can't cross this line right now. I'm like, I've got to put the dog in the basement. I when I was early in my first marriage, and I had some nephews and my daughter. There was three nephews and my daughter, and they're probably at this point like 4 to 7. And I was, the uncle that was the big prankster. And I believe it was a Stephen King thing. If not, it was a modern Twilight Zone thing. It was something in that vein. There were several short stories. I think it was the modern Twilight Zone. I don't know. But anyway, there was a scene where Ray Dawn Chong, Tommy Chong's daughter, she was the one, yeah, she was in a few movies. And so I told these kids, because I'd seen it, I said, "You got to watch this movie. It's the greatest movie you've ever seen. You got to watch this scene." So they're all lined up on the couch. And in the movie, she walks out into this parking lot, and like the camera's right on her, and she shape shifts and into this wild werewolf looking thing, and they still talk about it.
mm,
They still talk about it. And their mothers got pissed at me. But, and I get it. But on the other hand, sooner or later, we've all got to face everything, because we are everything. And how can we claim that we're enlightened or awakened if we're not looking ourselves in the face? Because everything is that, you know, everything that's presented to us is, it's for our growth. And that's why this series is redeeming in a way, because we are the ghost.
mm. Yes, well, my Saint Bernard dog, the stuffed one, did eventually come out of the basement, but initially I just didn't want to face it, much like many people don't want to face the ghost that they encounter. But everything has perfect timing, and at different stages of life, we see things in different ways. I remember another Stephen King movie that influenced me was Firestarter.
Mm.
I really was taken into that Drew Barrymore portrayal of the character. And I hadn't been completely afraid of fire at that stage, but I became more intrigued with it as the result. And I was involved in, camping as a teacher of how to build fires and things. So sometimes we can look at something that begins as a fear and embrace it, embody it, and harness that energy, harness the ghost or what used to be the ghost, and see things completely different point of view.
Mm. I didn't, take into consideration some of these movies as being ghost movies. So like
Mm,
Firestarter would be one. I could think of a lot of them, now. E.T. I would
mm,
never thought of. But one of my
mm,
favorite movies that I've ever seen, and I know it's corny and I know it's but it's a Wonderful Life. Jimmy
mhm,
Stewart. It's like made in the 50s. It's a black and white movie. And
mhm,
the storyline is he's in total distraught and he wants to jump off a bridge in the middle of winter because he's broke and all this, he's just lost his reputation and he feels like shit. And an angel comes and basically uh, talks him out of it, and then everything changes. That made a big impact on me because of the fact that it went from, even as a little kid when I first saw it, because this guy was going one direction and he actually didn't just, kind of curve a little bit this way or that way. He went 180 degrees the other way.
mm,
And I feel like that's what this uh, refining of the connotation of ghost speaks to, because it is about greater awareness and greater balance and harmony in the natural unfoldment of creation for yourself.
mm. Speaking of Jimmy Stewart, there's another movie that he's quite well known for, which is viewed as a ghost movie. It's When He Sees the Giant Rabbit. Do you remember
Hmm.
that movie?
Yeah, didn't I bring that up last week? Was it last week? Yeah, I brought it up last week. Yeah, that movie. And because I was telling you about Donnie Darko. You have to watch Donnie Darko. I mean, that movie is a contemporary. Well, I don't know what the name of that movie was that you're talking about, but I know what you're talking. It was a great movie, and Donnie
Yeah.
Darko is very much like that.
Well, with that particular movie, he was talking to this being that other people didn't initially see. And in the era that it was created, they wanted to put him into an institution, a psychiatric institution, because they decided he was hallucinating, and this was a very bad thing. And in another era, we might see things in a very different way. But the context in which a movie's made is very important as well, because there's the status quo understanding of what a ghost is, what's culturally acceptable, what's not culturally acceptable. And that is one context for ghost movie in that era.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a really good point. That like I have a very good friend that's Vietnamese, and I've got to know a lot about her family. They came from Vietnam after the war. Her father was
Hmm.
a political prisoner and they escaped on a shrimp boat, and it was just this whole amazing story. But the reason I bring it up is because of the dragon frequency and consciousness within their culture that's very similar to the depth of the Western religion in Western civilization. And so, when I first started to learn about it, it even as open as I am, I was like, wow, you guys actually, hey, we talk about this just like you talk about, your religion, in a traditional home. So the cultural thing is huge. It really is. And I have a feeling that as we move further in this awakening and the collective consciousness continues to expand, the very things that we we have seen as the greatest ghost are going to be the very things that we end up being like the big pillars, of our expansion, our new earth, however you want to, describe it. But So those things that we look at as myths and supernatural and otherworldly are really not. And they're only that in those categories because we believe they are. Now it's
Mm.
time to wake up.
Well, that Jimmy Stewart movie is called Harvey. That was the
Harvey,
name of
that's
the one.
right. Yeah, Harvey. Yeah.
And I totally relate and resonate with what you're saying about myth and culture. And when you do start seeing things other people don't see, it's rather remarkable how synchronistic it is. You draw other people into your life that see similar things. So if it's dragons that you see, dragon spirits, for example, then you encounter other people who do see similar things. If it's other kinds of spirits, whatever the guides are, Native American, you draw guides in. In Australia, if it happens to be some kind of animal totem, then Aboriginal cultural heritage is drawn into your life. So you get reinforcement to remind yourself that what you're seeing has a degree of truth in it for you, whatever that happens to be. And that's a very valuable way to look at ghosts also, because ghosts are traditionally things that are supposed to be invisible, things that we aren't meant to see or aren't supposed to be seeing. But as we gather or gain confidence in ourselves and we come to trust ourselves more, then those things we originally saw as ghosts are no longer ghosts. They're part of our wider or more expanded truth and reality.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. And speaking of totems, just look at look at the faces of so many totems around the world and so many
Mm,
old symbols and sculptures and pictures. I mean, they're not pretty things, okay? And that thing, that experience that I referenced to you about that weekend I spent with another person where they were shapeshifting, it was at the beginning of my reawakening, but it was full of code from start to finish. For those 48 hours, it was a wide. Now I could have run. I mean, I could have just left. I actually grabbed a crucifix that was on the wall and I put it in front of this person when it first happened. I came out of the bathroom and I looked over in the corner because my guides were very present at the time. I said, "What the hell am I supposed to do here? You didn't give me a fucking owner's manual." And I'm like, "I am soul." I mean, so I think this speaks to the value, the great value of the shadow, of the ghost, and then ultimately that who is the ghost? What is the ghost? Well, the ghost is me. It's me. And so what's the universe saying all the time? Do you want to grow? Do you want to get to know yourself better? Do you want to serve? Because the more you know yourself, the more you grow, the more we all do. But I believe now maybe we're coming to maybe that's why this book is coming out at this time, and there'll probably be similar things coming out to where the light can be, or the darkness, so to speak, the ghost can be received in uh, a newfound, refined perspective to see the light within it.
mm. I'd like to share another film that was drawn to my attention by one of our listeners. I don't know if you've seen The Eye of the Beholder. Does that one ring any
I don't
bells
think
for
so.
you?
I don't think so.
I wasn't familiar with this one myself either, but it's interesting that it's a story about the ghost of rejection, and in the particular scenario, um, the the idea is this resistance to external conditioning. That's the theme of the movie, I guess. And it it portrays a dystopian society, a dictatorship that decided everyone must conform to certain monstrous aesthetic standards. So everyone's supposed to look like a monster. And there's this beautiful woman, and so she is viewed as being alienated from the environment. And she is at a stage where she is about to get some plastic surgery to make herself look ugly. and and there's this nurse in it that says, if I were you, I would have killed myself already, kind of thing. So it's really playing on self-worth, self-esteem. And the doctor in the film is also talking about euthanasia with this protagonist. But by the end, sorry for the spoiler, she decides that she's not going to demean herself by, taking apart her looks as they are. And she finds someone who appreciates her, loves her for who she is, and she goes and lives somewhere else. So she leaves the dystopian society rather than conforming with it, decides to love herself as she is, accept herself as she is. So for some people, looking in the mirror can feel like a ghost because they don't recognize or accept themselves for who they are. And
Mm.
that particular film looks at ghosts from that point of view.
Yeah, that's like that scene I was talking about in Poltergeist, where the guy looks in the mirror and he starts. I mean, that's
Pulling
to
his
me,
face off.
that's what I mean. That it's really a great movie, and I don't think that movie was made. I mean, there was a lot of energies involved in that movie, but there's so many uh, poignant, poignant, you know, uh, revelations. And again, that's probably a movie you could watch 5 or 6 times and pick up so many different things. But yeah,
You could do that
that's
with a
us.
lot of movies.
Well, you know what I mean. But that's like what we're doing right now. We're looking in that mirror, and everything's falling away, and then we just start. What's left? You
It's like,
know?
that's it. Well, there's another one that was brought to my attention. I'm not sure how many Stephen King fans we have out here, but um, one of them is called Dreamcatcher. Are you familiar with that one?
I don't know. It sounds familiar, but I don't know.
Well, the scene that was brought to my attention by our listener relates to when a man is sitting on the toilet, and there's this creature that comes up through the toilet at a point where he feels like he's in the ultimate position of vulnerability,
Well,
and
obviously.
um,
That's
and
funny.
does things that we really don't get into on this program. But anyway, it causes people to sort of look into the toilet and wonder if they're being ghosted in the toilet before they sit down. This is what this person brought up. So source of fear, what is it that we fear?
Yeah.
Vulnerability is a big one for a lot of people.
Yeah.
It's not just the unseen specter that comes through the wall, it's qualities that we forget about that actually bring us strength.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of ways to look at that. And there's a lot of things obviously that have separated and divided us. And I think part of that is in gender. But if a woman opens herself, that's in the physical experience, that's one of the greatest physical representations of vulnerability, opening all the way. But the reason I bring this up is because it runs rampant in all of us, the men, the women, and so on, you know, uh, because that's meeting the ghost, that's opening up to the unknown. And that's a very, very crazy thing to do. Um, and that's just one example. But I think these occurrences are happening more rapidly in moment by moment in each one of our lives by force or by flow. It's happening. And I think the other thing that comes to mind is if you're going to go into the void, if you're going to open up and be vulnerable, right? We can either just go in and in the deer in the headlights and say, okay, I'm surrendering, or we can invoke our creativity and we can play with that energy, that ghost. The imagination becomes what it potentially uh, can be. Obviously, intuitiveness is there, uh, courage is there. uh, But seriously, I feel like that it's one thing to open up to our ghost. It's almost like our experience here. We woke up and became aware, oh, this is who I am, what I am, and what I'm a part of. But now what do we do with it? Right? So meeting the ghost is a great thing. It's another level or threshold crossed of our awareness. But how do you know, I sit with my demons. It's been a huge part of my journey. And
Mm,
I don't talk about it a lot, but I'm going to tell you it's been huge. It's the biggest part.
mm.
It really is.
It's very meaningful what you're sharing here because, we can look at ghost stories as metaphors. Something like Casper, which is also mentioned, Casper the friendly ghost, that passes through walls. What are we doing when we sit with our demons or our ghosts? We're allowing them to pass through us. We're seeing them as energy, be it resistance, doubt, sense of rejection, whatever our fears happen to be. We allow them to pass through us when we see them as they truly are. We can see through them, much like we would like to see through ghosts or we do in cartoons and movies. Why is it that a ghost is portrayed as something that's transparent?
Touche, pun intended. No, that's a great point. That's a really great point. You know, you know, it so the to me the ghost can teach me in ways I never knew. We've all had the love and light come in, and we're very comfortable in those scenarios. Oh my God, I can feel it in my body, and it's just this euphoric, ecstatic thing. It's orgasmic, it's soulgasmic, but you can become too comfortable with it. You can you can become too attached to it. And what I've learned from my demons, you know, my brethren, my aspects of that side of the 0 point, or however you want to look at it, is don't get cocky with them and don't get cocky with the light. They both have equal amounts of humility that they can serve you. And one thing about the light is, as soon as you throw an absolute down on it, which is no different than saying, I don't want to look at that ghost, you say, well, Mother Goddess, I love the universe and I'm one with everything, but that stuff over there doesn't jive with me. And that's not me. What's going to happen? We all been there. Everything's going perfectly. We're in balance and harmony, and we think we got this shift. And then all of a sudden, somebody comes and kicks us in the ass, and we're flat on our stomach on the pavement with our knees scraped. It's a powerful proposition what you're bringing to the table, because we've talked about it in these circles over the years, but the reality is we've yet to tap into it fully, and this is where the gold is.
Mm.
Because one
Well,
thing you can say is, you can look at all the different religions and the cultural influences and all that stuff. But one thing that if you take a survey of all those groups around the world, there's going to be a certain segment of ghostly things that we're all going to agree on and say, no, we don't want to go there. And that's where we're going.
that's it, systematically, one thing at a time.
Hmm.
And I love how we've been exploring in today's show about some of the sample movies that people find dear to their hearts, or classics, or things that they'll visit. But there are always new things. There are always new versions of ghosts until we're ready to embrace what they represent. So, whatever you would like to explore in a movie or another scenario, please let us know. I know that there are a number of alien related ghosts that people have asked me to explore in future shows with you, Todd, and I'm sure that that could be a very interesting show, maybe even more than one.
Yeah, I mean, so many of these subjects are even a movie, like Poltergeist. We could probably, and I haven't seen it in years, but just the fact that you brought it up, and I'm thinking about all the different scenes, like the scene where he goes into the pool. Like that's crazy. I mean, I'm not doing that. You know, you know what I mean? Or they're in the hotel and they throw the TV out at the end. I think it's at the end where they move out and they put the TV outside.
Yes.
Um, but yeah, I feel like this is a very I feel like this is kind of representative of where the collective consciousness is moving towards. And there's many streams, but we've talked about the shadow, but we've talked about it and cleared it at a level that's served us. But I believe we go deeper now, and these ghosts really, another movie I think of is this movie with Nicolas Cage and Tia Leone, and he is in New York City, and he's a stockbroker. He's a power player. He's like a multi-millionaire bachelor, lives in a high-rise penthouse, and he wakes up one day in the bed with his high school sweetheart, or his a love of his life. That something happened, and they didn't connect. And he runs a tire store. He's a manager at a tire store, and he lives in the suburbs. And he's got all these kids and dogs, and and he's freaking out the whole time saying this, first of all, what happened? And second of all, I never wanted this. And then it turns out that in the end, that would be his choice, right? So the ghost is first, he's put in this other timeline. And then and then once he says, wow, I'm happy, guess what? He ends up back where he was. And there's the ghost. And so
Mm.
the moral of that story was that after the whole experience and saga, he had the power and the will and the connection with Universal to go where he wanted to go. But he
Mm.
wouldn't have known without the first ghost. And and
Well,
and
that's
and you know what I mean? And the other thing is where there's one ghost, there's another one.
that's
That's
it. And
just the
that
way the
story,
void works.
that story is a great one. I'm familiar with it, but it also brings us back to the classic Wizard of Oz story and Dorothy and the red shoes, because she gets these red ruby slippers from the witch that she kills with the house when it lands in Oz, and she wears these shoes throughout all of her adventures, and gathering wisdom in Oz. And then she learns at the end of the story that it was the shoes that could get her home all the time, but she
Mm,
didn't know.
mm,
And if she had used them to go home at the beginning, she wouldn't have the wisdom that she gained through all of those adventures with her new friends. So everything does come full circle. And sometimes it's better that we don't have that wisdom at the end of the road at the beginning, because we wouldn't be who
mm.
we are now with that wisdom, would we?
That's exactly right. I was talking to a beautiful sister today in Austria on the show, and that was the whole point. It's like, we always, I don't know about you, but I'm pretty sure we've all had these times where we're like telling the team, hey man, can't you just tell me a little bit more about what's going on? And they're like, my soul will tell me, dude, you set this up. And if I tell you, then the whole game is over. So
Hmm.
yeah, that's the thing. And that's why I made the comment about there's always another ghost. I might have told you this, but the most scared I've ever been in my life, ever, was in lucid dream where there was a big pop and all of a sudden I didn't realize it at the time right away, but I was in the void. I was just suspended in this darkness, and it scared the living hell out of me. You talk about, you were talking about the nightmares and your heart's pumping and all that, but it's what you said earlier. It's like the more I realized, it was like being on the street. It was like the more I realized that apparently I couldn't change what was happening until I felt into it all the way. Then I got shot out of the birth canal into the toroidal field of light rainbow. But it wasn't until I was like, where am I went through the list like, oh my god, I'm wrong about everything. I'm in hell, I'm in purgatory, I don't, something, and then you just feel into it all. I mean, that's I think the value of to talk about the shadow, to talk about the ghost, and say, yeah, I'll talk about it, I recognize it, but to actually feel it, to go back to The Exorcist when she was doing some of that devilish shit, I mean, that was some scary stuff. But it was the feeling, just like me listening to that song that would come on the radio as a kid. I knew innately that I had to go through it until I was, until I was good, until that feeling, had been fully felt and allowed and accepted, and I guess it's a metaphor for these aspects we call ghost, which is really ourself, that, to put it in plain terms, to be loved, to be accepted. This is parts of us that we're alienated from, going back to the top of the show as you use that term, but it's alienated from ourselves. But
Mm,
not anymore. Not with books like this and not with conversations like this. And you know how it goes. As the individual goes, so goes the collective. I mean, I think we're going to see some fantastic art and creations come out of this world in these incoming years as people translate these things by virtue of their experience.
And the fact that it's multidimensional, that it's
Mm,
multi-sensory, feeling your way through things, as you point out, is so important. And when you hear the music is what makes a lot of these movies because there are different tones, different vibrations, and each one, affects us in a different way or triggers us in a different way. And as we become more tuned in to our own core vibration, then we are more aware of resonance and dissonance. And these are
mm.
some of the topics we're going to be exploring some more as well.
That's a great point. That's a great way to put it. My very close brother of mine, Ty Hudnall in Sedona, he's a master musician. He's also like a lot of other things, psychic and whatever. But anyway, he's a masterful wizard musician, right? And plays multi instruments and orchestrates, produces, the whole tracks and all that. But anyway, he taught me through the music. He taught me about the harmonious and discordant. And so I'll jam with him, improv jam with him and do my thing. And he'll put on like this horror movie music. Like it'll be playing along like da, 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 and then I'll go dun 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 dun. And you're like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, what are you doing? But he explains that it just like our lives, just like our soul's lineage, that it's that range. So you bring in the contrast, you bring it in because that ghost story will allow you to reap a higher level of frequency or dimension. But you can't. It's like going through a Stargate with two dragons standing in front of it. And what is the password? The password is you got to go experience the depths of this. It's like a slingshot. The
Yes,
universe
and
is great.
I was just going to say that reminds me of a scene from, now what is it? It's the never-ending story when Atreyu is facing this gateway, and the gateway has these two Egyptian cat gods, or whatever, and other knights have attempted to pass through and they've been incinerated because they aren't at the right vibration. Their heart isn't pure. So
Right.
every time you go through a different ordeal or challenge or adversity in your life, face a ghost, whatever that happens to be, whatever form it takes, whatever symbol it represents, you are moving through another level of a vibrational spectrum. And
Yeah.
that's part of what we will be exploring in more detail.
Sounds good to me.
Well, thanks,
Well,
Todd. I always have lots of fun with you.
well, I mean, I think it's a theme and a subject of substance, and I feel like that these things that are being brought into our experience. Did you hear that? Um, where two or more gather is a very powerful thing. It doesn't matter how many views. It doesn't matter any of that stuff because we are opening this up in witness uh, with others into this new grid, which we know is multidimensional. So if we can't get past the ghost story, we're gonna we're gonna be stuck watching Poltergeist for the next few millennia.
Different versions of the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Like a record with a scratch on it. Well, thank you very much, and I look forward to next week. And have a good afternoon. Yeah, down under.
Thanks, and thanks to all our listeners and viewers. Keep
Mm,
those examples of feedback and suggestions coming.
yes. Thank you, everybody.